Welcome to Staples.
Hi, Staples guy. I have to get my kids ready for back to school.
Staples has tons of deals, like one subject notebooks for just 25 cents. So they'll be 110% ready.
Wait a minute, that's 10% more ready than 100% ready.
That's right.
Yeah, I was a math major.
I could tell.
Make low prices happen. Make 110% ready happen. Staples. Make more happen. Staples filler paper is just 75 cents all season long.
Limit 30 per customer in-store. Limit 10 per customer online with $25 minimum purchase. Notebook price in-store only. Ends 9/12/15.
Good evening and welcome to Radio PRS. I'm your co-host, Mike Ranton. Radio PRS is brought to you by the Psychical Research Society of Kansas City. PRS is a not-for-profit organization whose purposes include programs and activities to investigate, study, research, demonstrate, discuss, interpret, and expand information concerning psychic phenomena, parapsychology, and related subjects, and to disseminate information by any and all media of communication. The Psychical Research Society is not just an organization for those who practice the intuitive arts. We are here for anyone who's interested in exploring the subjects covered in our mission statement. If you'd like to find out more about us, please visit our website at PRSKC.org. Our guest this evening is forensic psychologist, paranormal researcher, and author Sarah Soderlund. You can call in and talk with Sarah and Nikki this evening at 646-668-8212. Now, here's your host, Nikki Williams.
Good evening, Mike. How are you this evening?
Good. How are you?
I am absolutely wonderful. It has been a beautiful day here in Kansas City, beautiful 72 degrees, kind of a little fall preview, I like to think of it as, which is my absolute favorite time of year. I'm very excited to be with you this evening, and I'm very excited about our guest tonight. Sarah Soderlund has an amazing list of credentials, and she is not your average paranormal researcher. I say that knowing that there really is no such thing as an average paranormal researcher, but she brings such an interesting perspective to the field of paranormal investigation. And I'd like to welcome you to our show tonight. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us.
Man, it is my honor. That was a great introduction. My cheeks were kind of getting tight there. I was going, oh, that's so cool. So thank you. No, it's my honor.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we are very glad to have you with us, like I said. And the moment I read your bio on your website, paranormalsarah.webs.com, for those of you out there, and it's Sarah with an H, it's spelled correctly.
Finish.
I thought, what a fascinating story that you must have. You have such an amazing list of credentials, and I'm not just talking about the master's degree, and I'm also talking about you're a certified hypnotherapist, holistic practitioner. I mean, you've got such an amazing list of accomplishments. Before we really get into talking about paranormal events and occurrences, tell me a little bit about you. Tell me about Sarah. Tell me about how you got to this point in your journey, because it's got to be a fascinating story.
Well, it's a long story. Even though I'm not that old, it kind of started with being a young woman in a household, kind of a very matriarchal family, a very psychic and gifted grandmother on my mother's side. My mother was very psychically intuitive and just a really big practitioner, and they were trying to kind of grasp onto the gypsy culture that was their ancestry that kind of ended in the Holocaust. And my mom married my father, who was a Southern Baptist, so he was a really devout Christian man. Right, and his family was very devout, but they kind of fell in love, and they were very rebellious, and it didn't work out. They ended up getting divorced, but during my childhood, my sister and I, we had a really great opportunity to have this perspective of the religious and also the spiritual, and to kind of see how those melded together. My mother was always gardening and doing the lunar cycles and very big in kind of herbology and naturalistics, and we didn't have medicine in the household. Everything was always going to the garden or going to, you are what you eat. and trying to be a healthy person. And my dad was always very devout in that, yeah, spirituality was a lifestyle, but it was also about, you know, the doctrine and the Bible and going to Scripture and things like that. So I had a really good opportunity to kind of learn both how they worked together and how they clashed a little bit in some cases. And that first part of the clashing was when my sister, who's older than I, went through kind of her teenage years and was very interested in divination. And growing up with my grandma Young, divination was a huge part of the family gatherings, whether it was palmistry or doing tarot cards with just playing cards on the table, or learning to read your environment and read people, and just to trust your intuition. That was a really big part of what my mother's family was all about, was that, you know, knowing and loving and appreciating and practicing your gifts. And we lived in a house that had a lot of activity. There was a lot of interaction with kind of, I kind of loosely call it the other side, but whether you call it a ghost or a spirit or an apparition or what have you, all kinds of things are always happening. And I didn't know that wasn't normal until I was an adolescent and kids started coming over to spend the night. And things would happen, and they would call their parents and be going home in the night, and rumors started at school, you know, that I'm a witch, she's a witch, and it was really difficult. Right. And it was really difficult. And so I was lucky to have a mother who was very witty and tactful and strong and fiery, and a sister, an older sister, who helped kind of guide me through those tumultuous years. And then I decided in high school that, you know, I want to go into psychology because I want to know what makes me different from everyone else. And I had a stepfather come into the picture who kind of put me into forensics. He was a really callous man and very abusive person, and just the complete opposite of my father. And so I really thought, you know what, with my life experiences and everything that I've been through, and at that point the PRS was in my life. I was going to workshops, and I really loved the Kansas City metaphysical community and learning more and more, and kind of seeing that it was about who I was, and I wanted to know more about that. And I think that's why most psychologists start out, is they're kind of trying to fix themselves, or they're trying to understand themselves. And so I started working at the State Mental Health Hospital right down there on Paseo in Kansas City. We called it the Farm.
Oh, yes.
And right. And going back and forth between Leavenworth and Western Missouri and the DMH there, and seeing, again, this kind of change in perception, that some people are going to the church when they're hearing voices or hearing the voice of God or having these issues, where other people are, you know, being diagnosed as schizophrenic, and they're being brought into the ER and they're being medicated. And I didn't quite know, you know, why the world was this way. And I thought, man, this is really scary, because if I wasn't brought up with my mother's family, I would have been exercised and medicated, and who knows what could have happened to me. And I felt really blessed. And so I think I was 19 years old, and I wrote a paper my freshman year of college, and a professor of mine at MU.
You're cutting out on me just a little bit, Sarah.
Oh, no. Can you hear me?
Losing your connection just a little bit.
Uh-oh.
No.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We're having a little bit of a technical issue, I think, but
can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're just.
Can you hear me now?
Just a little bit wobbly. It's an interesting sound. I'm trying to
see. There's my ghosties.
Get a clear signal.
There. I'm moving around. I'm like a Verizon wireless commercial. Can you hear me now?
Do you have? Are you on speakerphone by chance?
I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
there.
just
You're
on
back.
my phone. I'm back.
You're back.
Man,
I don't know what that was.
See, people,
we have issues like that occasionally when we're dealing, when we're talking about energies and dealing with entities and apparitions and things like that. Sometimes the energy gets a little crazy, you know, and you know, magic and electricity don't always mix.
Right. Okay, so I don't know where I lost you there.
I'm so sorry.
Where did I lose you?
Well, you were talking about your stepfather, actually, and
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, he was a jerk. And so that's what, he was a jerk. So that's what led me into forensics and kind of utilizing my life experiences empathetically towards people in the psychological community and going into psychology. And then I kind of realized that, some people are diagnosed schizophrenic where other people are amazing mediums, and like people are hearing voices, but different communities accept it differently. And my freshman year of college, I wrote a paper kind of talking about how I was really blessed that I wasn't condemned to like a Bellevue hospital as a kid because I had some experiences growing up. And a professor recommended hypnotherapy. And so I started doing hypnotherapy both as a client and then after a few really amazing experiences, started using that because I thought, someday I'm going to be a practicing psychologist, and I don't want to just recommend people medications because I don't feel comfortable with that as the only option. So metaphysical type stuff has really allowed me I call it my Batman tool belt, but I have a lot of gadgets, and I think that it's not just helpful to me, but I want to have those things as useful tools to people who come to me for help.
And I think that's absolutely wonderful and we talk a lot on the show about the spiritual toolbox. We talk about how different modes of healing, different modes of divination, different psychic spiritual gifts, they're all tools that can be utilized to help in finding the path that's right for you, but also help in creating your healthy and happy reality, and you manifesting that type of reality. And it's interesting that you talk about, and psychology has been a favorite subject of mine since college. It's fascinating. And my oldest daughter she's a double major psychology and theater. Anyway, it's interesting that you mention how frequently persons who have spiritual gifts are diagnosed with mental illnesses that don't fit, and I'll tell you why I find this interesting. A few years ago, we were having our Yule ritual here, and we're kind of an eclectic mix of every faith in this household. And we were having a Yule ritual, and as I drew the circle and cast the quarters and called the quarters, I had a friend over who has been diagnosed as schizophrenic. And one of the things that I make sure that I do when I cast that circle is to verbally say, only those spirits that I allow in are allowed into this sacred space. Only those that are here for purposes of good and those that you got to get by me first, Right. And the voices that she heard went away during our ritual. And I said, that is not a person with schizophrenia. That is a person with more than likely an amazing gifted mediumship who has been her whole life misdiagnosed and who has been kept from exploring her own gift that she was given for a reason.
Absolutely.
So I find it absolutely fascinating, and I find it truly inspiring that one of the things that you try to do is help people to differentiate between those types of things.
Well, I think it works well, and it's frustrating. It's kind of very similar to when you're calling the corners and you've got your sacred space. There's this passageway, and I have found that the metaphysical can easily go into the realm of psychology. But the psychological realm, because it's struggling to be kind of a formal science, then, it has to tiptoe through legal, politics, things like that. It's very close-minded to the metaphysical realm. And so I've struggled with that. I've struggled with, if during the day I'm a professional psychologist, how do I take those clients and put a bug in their ear that, hey, just consider other options, and to do that in a way that's accepted by my colleagues. And I was scared of that for a long time, and it wasn't until I kind of just trusted the universe and said, I'm just going to put it out there, and if people don't like that I couple those together, they won't come to me. you know. But if people are open to both, then I'll get it. And it's really worked out well, because I have people that say, I want to know if I am depressed, or if maybe I just have some negative attachments, or I want to know if I'm, you know, I've got sleep apnea and major sleep disorder type stuff, or if maybe I'm being visited in the night by something. I want to be able to explore both options without judgment. And that's what I try to do.
So many spiritual gifts that could be misdiagnosed. As you know, I can think of persons diagnosed with, for example, depression or bipolar, who are empaths, who can't tune out the emotions that they're feeling that don't even belong to them, and the damage that could do to someone's psyche to be misdiagnosed and then placed on medication that isn't even right for them. I mean, wow. Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow. Well, I digress, though. I know I really want to get into the paranormal events discussion, but the psychological aspect and how it ties in with the spiritual is also so very interesting. We'll have to do another show on that sometime.
Yep. We'll do a whole show on that, I'm telling you.
Well, what I also find wonderful is that you are able to mesh your psychological training with your paranormal training and with your paranormal investigation skills. And how has that helped you in the field of paranormal research?
Oh, it's huge. It's a huge help, because growing up being open and welcoming to my abilities and learning how to cope with them. I mean, it's funny, some colleagues will meet me and say, gosh, Sarah, you're OCD and you're, you know, kind of manic and you're, and of course we're going down this labeling journey, but I'll say, no, I have my methods, you know, and when I enter into a space, certain spaces affect me differently. You know, you can call it psychometry, or you can just say you're an empath, or you're sensitive, or you're intuitive, whatever your linguistics is. It's about knowing yourself. And so psychology has helped me do that, so that when I enter into a space helping someone who feels chaotic, or they feel stressed, or they just feel confused, that we can separate the environment from the person, not completely, because of course we are of our environment, but to kind of pull them away and say, let's talk about you. And so the psychology part of it, helping me be an active listener, helping me understand neurolinguistics, and hypnotherapy, helping me be calm, helping me be empathetic and therapeutic and not condescending or overly fluffy. And assessing that person and then going into their space and kind of utilizing my own intuition and saying, yeah, you know, I felt a familiar energy to this, and I can kind of associate it with the range of investigations that I've been on, whether they've been being a part of an exorcism, or being a part of a cleansing, or being a part of a family that's going through a lot of abuse, and just kind of recognizing that energy. And I think that you can only do that unless you're just extremely gifted, which I'm not. I would say I'm gifted, but it comes with experience. You know, I remember, this is going to sound, well, maybe it won't sound crazy, because this is the perfect radio show for this. Usually I'm putting that liability waiver out there. This might sound crazy. But I remember my mother taking my sister and I to the cemetery, and, you know, middle of the day, just taking our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and going out to the cemetery and walking up behind the headstones and sitting behind the headstone and putting our hands over the rock or over the limestone and just introducing ourselves, you know, right there in the sunshine, and saying, hey, I'm Sarah, and I'm 11 years old, and I'm just visiting you today. How are you doing? And just sitting, you know, and taking note of what birds fly by or what I hear on the wind, and listening. And then when I'm done with my conversation, I come around to the front of the headstone and I say, oh, this is a beloved mother, and she was 42 when she died. And you kind of get that feeling like you've introduced yourself, and you kind of know what maybe that spirit and that experience and that energy feels like. And just for one example of just being familiar and being welcoming I think that the combination of my paranormal experience with the psychology, they work so well together. It's always mind-boggling to me when people wonder, like, whoa, how does that work? And I'm like, how did it not work? I mean, they're just, it's like vinegar and oil in a way. It's just like the perfect dressing, and it's really helped me a lot. And I think it helps other people when they're in need of something, or they're having a haunting, or they're having an experience that's pretty scary. For me, for the most part, I go into a situation and I'm pretty calm, and I just want to assess. And I think that comes with the forensic psychology part of me, walking into a jail cell with someone who's beaten someone to death with a manhole cover and saying, this is a person, this is someone's son, and just being aware. And, I like it.
Oh, definitely. And that openness that you talk about, being open, being aware, that's something that we could all use to practice more, not just in situations where we're dealing with whether it is the paranormal or a situation that's a little off the charts in some way. It's something we could all learn from on a day-to-day basis, just in our dealings with each other, being open to each other's presence and each other's emotions, and being aware of that. Well, that connection, I like to talk about that on the show a lot, about how we're all connected, that we're all one. And being open and present for that other person and with that other person, or people, or animals, or what have you, or spirits.
Yeah, whatever.
But it's something we can really, I've always taught my girls from the time they were very small that you have to ask permission of the flowers before you pick them in my flower garden. The flowers, you have to stop and listen and pay attention. You'll know if they're okay with it or not. If you're open.
That.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's just, I think it's something we can practice just even with nature.
Oh, yeah. And it's an appreciation for all things, because sometimes in the paranormal, typically people aren't reaching out to me if they're having angels visit them and give them lottery numbers. That's not the reason that people call me.
Yeah, that's
usually
not where they're coming.
Usually
they're probably pretty happy about that. So.
Right, they're out on a beach somewhere. But people are typically calling me if they're stressed and if they're scared. And I can honestly say I love that you give the example of your daughters, because my children have taught me so much about that connection, about kind of that synchronicity of just to be mindful. We use that word a lot in psychology. It's kind of a fluffy word, but it's true. Just to be mindful of things, and whether it's thanking our body when we wake up in the morning and saying, gosh, let's just be thankful. Or when we go on our walks, my oldest son, he's a tree hugger. He loves to hug the trees. And so he'll be like, look at that daddy tree over there. We should say hi. And I'm like, all right. And he's just very in tune with that sort of thing. And I love that, because I feel that way about hauntings and paranormal situations. A lot of times we're scared of something because we're not used to it, or we've not been taught to appreciate it. And so sometimes I walk into those locations and I sit and I say, man, you've got someone who's chosen you to communicate. And that's kind of cool.
Wow.
And so let's figure out what this connection is and why you, of all the people and all the space and time, have this connection to this entity. Because it's there somewhere, and that's part of that empathy, is learning, well, maybe this person was a child abuser and you've been abused as a child. And so maybe they're, coming through to try and reflect that life lesson. And there's a lot of anger and resentment and frustration because of that shared experience, but it's not something we should be fearful of, all the time. We should look for it in a different filter, I guess.
Definitely. And there's almost always a reason. There's almost always a message or a communication that I've found, anyway, that's trying to come through. It's different for every situation, but let's talk a little bit about the different types of paranormal events that you've dealt with, and talk to us just a little bit for those of our listeners who don't necessarily have a lot of experience with paranormal occurrences. There are hauntings. Give me some examples of different types of paranormal occurrences that you've seen and worked with.
Well, I call it my little paranormal umbrella, because for most people, the paranormal might be a show that they're watching on television, or somebody, that they've seen on a television series, or maybe it's Dan Aykroyd, in a 1980s Ghostbusters movie, and that's what you think of when you think of paranormal. But I kind of think of it as anything that's not normal, and so it can be, the hypnosis. I deal with a lot of alien abduction and alien abduction regressions and experiences that, you might find in a Whitley Strieber book. The things that, again, kind of tie in with the psychology part, the paranoia, the time lapses, the strange occurrences, the sleep disorders, the symptoms that come up in your life that just don't make sense, and intuitively you know that they don't make sense, and you're trying to make that connection. But also under that umbrella is paranormal things like growing up in the house that my sister and I lived in was very haunted by an old woman spirit. And the reason I say that is not just empathetically feeling that connection that this is an older woman and knowing the history of the house, but she was an actual apparition that many people that would come to the house would see. Whether we were having a family gathering or something, you'd see this woman, and then she would just not be there, and people would go, "Hey, was that your grandma that was stopping by?" And we'd say, "No, our grandma lives in Springfield." And she just had a very strong presence, and she never really interacted. She never pushed things or grabbed your hair or scared you, but she would just show up, and she always made herself known to just anybody. I would have friends come over, and there was only one front door in our house. It was a kind of a small little farmhouse, so you'd only come in or out one way. And she'd just walk through the room, and you'd have this, my friend be like, "When did your grandma get here? I never saw her come through the door." And you'd go, "Oh, yeah, that's our old lady," And then people would be like, "What?" And it just became a normal occurrence. And so my mom would, leave out food for her and talk to her. And my mom was a musician, so she would play music and say, "Hey, so-and-so, I'm going to play a tune for you," and kind of incorporated her into our family. So I think that's why she stayed around so much. But then I've also been present where it's not an apparition. It's not something like that. Instead, it's something more like this duplex that I lived in just outside of Parkville in Kansas City. And it was kind of up near Tiffany Springs, where you've got all of these ancient stories of the Indians and the tribal history there. And, of course, in Missouri, you've got the border war and the Civil War type stuff. And it's just a very active area with a lot of history. And this duplex, not spooky looking or creepy in any way. And I had been there 6 months and had nothing. It was like a dead horse, just nothing. And then my cabinets started opening, and my refrigerator doors would be open. Even though they're supposed to be shut and they're on a spring to shut, they would just be wide open. And things like electrical issues, things would flicker, and I would call my landlord and be like, "Hey, all of my lights are going off and on. I need you to come check them." And nothing was ever explainable. Again, kind of like you had mentioned in the first part of the show, a lot of electrical interference, which is pretty typical symptom for paranormal hauntings. And then I had an experience that scared me out of that duplex. I had an experience where I had lost my grandfather. He was very, very close to me. And as a psychic and as an empath, I wanted him to show himself to me. I really, wanted that experience and that connection. And it never happened. And then one day, and it's not like a paranormal movie where it's like The Conjuring happening at night or anything like that. It was like 12 o'clock, I was getting ready for work. I was a waitress at the time. I was going to school at the daytime and waitressing at night. And out of the corner of my eye, out of my peripheral vision, I see something move at the end of the hallway. And I thought, okay, finally, whatever's been messing with my cabinets and messing with my cat and messing with my refrigerator is going to show itself. And I wasn't scared at all. And I kind of kept brushing my teeth, and I saw something move again. And I was like, man, is that my cat? And it kind of looked dark, and my cat was a tiny little white calico cat. And as I stepped out into the hallway to go investigate, I immediately felt unsafe. And it was kind of that intuitive feeling that you get when you're walking in a dark parking garage at night, you know, downtown or something, and you're like, ugh. Every step gets a little faster. You feel something on your heels. And I just felt like, man, I don't feel safe right now. And I walked back into the bathroom, and my cat came running around the corner and came in the bathroom with me, which never happens because he doesn't want to be anywhere near the bathtub or the faucet. And
water.
Right. And then I kind of looked down the hall, and I said, you know what? I'm not scared of you. If you're here, show yourself. And then I saw my grandfather, and I had this moment, like my heart skipped a beat. I thought, oh, my God, this is my grandpa. And as I went to go walk towards him, that feeling came over me again, the goosebumps and just the very unsafe feeling. And I knew it wasn't my grandpa. And I watched this thing at the end of the hallway move towards me, and it was so terrifying to me that of all of my years living in a haunted house and even working with PRS and helping other people and going to workshops and hearing other stories and going ghost hunting, you know, at the Belvoir Winery at night and trespassing illegally, I'm sure. I had never had this kind of feeling, and I was so offended that it came to me in the form of my grandfather, that I knew it was trying to penetrate something intimate to me. And I coiled up in the fetal position with my cat, and I shut the bathroom door, and I stayed there until my roommate got home, and I said, I want out of my lease. I'm out. And I kind of had that experience, and I look back on it thinking, like, I should have had a cleansing or I should have called someone. But the feeling was so unsafe that I just didn't want to be there. And so when I show up for people now that call me and say, you know, we've been staying in a hotel, and, you know, my husband, he'll hear these stories and be like, why, what is so scary that these people aren't even staying in their house? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, no, I think when you're intuitively aware that something is unsafe, you don't want, you don't want to be near it. And I get it. I've had that experience. And, so, yeah, you know, and I don't necessarily say that was a demonic entity or I don't know what it was, because in the paranormal there are no guarantees. But I can tell you how it made me feel and what my reactions were. And so that was a paranormal experience that I kind of have, kept personal to me. But it's something that is very different than the old lady in my house, that we would leave food out for. It just was not the same thing.
Yeah. Totally different. And as a person who you were already very attuned with your inner guidance, which we actually talked about inner guidance last week on the show with our guests. But listening to that's a wise decision. And I can tell you right now, from the sense that I'm getting, it was wise of you to heed that guidance, and that there's a reason for those instincts. There's a reason for that survival instinct of, no, I need to get away from this situation. And that was the correct course. If you hadn't done that, the emotional trauma for you, I don't think would be something, I think you'd still be trying to work through that. I commend you for listening and getting out when that voice says, that little inner voice says, no, get out now. Yeah, you listen. And you did very well. Well,
and it's funny because it was one of those experiences that it really helped me know that sometimes you don't, and I hate to use the word meddle, sometimes you just don't, because there are times where I've shown up at a client's home where very, very negative things are happening. And I never get that intuitive feeling that I had then. And so at that point I'm wondering, like, is this person projecting some of their own stuff that they're going through, or is this, attachment or energy just really specifically being a predator towards them as a person and not towards anyone else? There's just so much to be explored, and that's where the parapsychology comes in, is kind of understanding or trying to understand conscious energy and spirit and intuition and guidance and being open, just being open to, man, every situation's different.
Very true. You know what? We have a caller, Sarah. So I'm going to go to our caller real quick, area code 914. You are on the air with Sarah and with Nikki here on Radio PRS. How can we help you today?
I'm so happy that I got through. Everything you were saying, I was just like, yes, I lived it. I know what you're talking about. And it's just
I'm sorry, what's your name,
unbelievable.
sweetheart? What's your first name?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Charity.
That's okay. Hi, Charity. I love that name.
I do too. And you've got such a very motherly energy about you. I'm excited. Well, I'm not excited that you improvised with that story, but
no, I mean, I understand when I've always had that growing up, not necessarily mediumship, but the feeling of knowing when there's a presence and if it's good or if it's not good. And I always said that it was kind of something God or Spirit gave me, so I knew when it was time to walk away and not see something you're not supposed to see or not be somewhere where it could be dangerous. And I went against that twice, and I ended up going through a lot of heck. I finally was able to sell the house and get out of there. I did endless cleansings and everything, and I knew before I bought the house, that this is not a test. Because I had friends telling me it's just because you have to face it and learn how to just, clear your space. You'll get over it, and they'll go away. And I think, like what you said before, it's true. There's just some things that, for me, that feeling, things that have taken place when I didn't listen to that feeling, it's not worth it. I feel like sometimes it's just better to just go if you are more intuitive.
I love that because it's validation for me that you even called in, because of all the people and all the times and that you would call in and have that story. So thank you for sharing it.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I love it because you use some phrases there that I think you hear a lot, where people say you just need to get over it. You need to learn to deal with it. And you kind of have to say, man, I deal with a lot and I learn from a lot, but how much do you want to, like, you find yourself using the word waste? How much time and energy do I want to waste on this? It's not my battle. And so I loved your language there, and Charity.
Oh, yes. Yes,
awesome.
Wonderful. And I'm so glad that you were able to learn that you need to listen to that inner guidance, that inner voice, and that you need to heed it. And I'm sorry you had to go through all the things that you've had to go through to learn that. But yeah, that intuition, that instinct is priceless. It's absolutely priceless. Yeah. And it's
I've been very blessed.
Yes, and we're blessed to get to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. I feel that way for getting through. When I saw you guys on again, because I had listened to the show last week, on the podcast, and I was like, oh, they're on again, and I can talk to them about the, this experience that I had, and I was like, this is so neat.
It called you to call.
It was really cool. It really is.
I like that.
It's hard. You don't really find people that you can actually talk to about this. I found a lot of my friends that are even, quote unquote psychic or mediums. They don't even really get it. They feel like you could just put up the blocker, stage the house, and that's it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Sometimes it's not that easy.
And there are times when you can do that. There are times. But the thing is, you will intuitively, and you will know when is right to go and when it's right to stay and fight. Well, I guess fight probably isn't the right word, but to stand your ground. You will have that inner knowing. And no one else can give you the knowing. Do you know what I mean? Blessings to your friends for being your friends, but they're not the one experiencing it. They're not the one.
They're not living with it. That's what I kept telling them.
Like, exactly.
You know, we're going on 3 years. Would you really want to deal with this all the time? No.
Right.
You know?
Well, and there's some instances, like I had kind of shared, where, man, if you're an intuitive person, you're used to those interactions, and they're not always bad. Sometimes they're suspenseful, sometimes they're surprising, sometimes they're unwanted or even annoying, but sometimes they're scary. And if you get that intuitive feeling that, you know, this isn't for me, it's kind of like the chicken exit at the roller coaster ride. There's no shame in saying that I don't really want to ride this ride right now. Maybe I'll do it next week, maybe I'll do it next year, but right now I just don't want to do it, and it won't be fun. So why ride the ride if it doesn't serve its purpose? You know what I mean? So
exactly.
I'm glad that you did that. I'm glad you did it.
That's
man.
how I felt.
My fist held high.
Oh, so I've always, like you said, I've always dealt with that stuff, and even now I do. And then, you know, there's just sometimes that I'll just clean my space and clear the house and clear the car and clear the animals and the kids, and you know, and it's not a big deal, but the one thing that I had to deal with that house was a totally different entity that was just bigger than me and wasn't my battle. It wasn't going to be my life house. You know, I had other things I could try to do to leave, and we did. You know, my issue now is that I think that I've had this one person that's been hitching a ride with us for a very long time, and it's not an evil, you know, spirit. You know, like what I had dealt with in the other home for so long, that belonged to the land there. And I was kind of wondering from you guys what I decided, and I don't know if this was a good idea or not, but I'm trying to listen to my gut as much as I can now. And I stopped saging as much because I felt like it was also getting rid of my protection. In a weird way. I don't know why. But I stopped about 2 months ago. But this cranky old guy is still there, and he's getting a little physical with people. And I don't understand why, you know, I haven't been able to get him to go.
That's trying to come through. I think this is what I'm getting. With the sage, for example, the reason you feel like the sage is not enhancing the protections and it could be diminishing them in some way is because there is communication that is trying to come through. And the more you block the communication, the more frustrated this spirit becomes. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, he touches you. It's creepy.
It's
and you know,
yeah, sometimes a little creepy goes a long way. Yeah, but the sage. I also want to put this out there for people who do smudge and burn sage. If you have anyone in the house with epilepsy, you should not burn sage. It can cause epileptic seizures, and I know that from experience with my oldest daughter and from what her neurologist has told me. But I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, definitely. But that's what I'm getting. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
Well, I think that belief system plays a really big role in intuitive power and empowerment. So even though I believe in saging, and they've even shown studies that saging diminishes bacteria in the air, so it serves a purpose, and it has a long tradition and history, which I love, but I'm not, you know, I think I'm 11 or 12% Cherokee. I'm not a Native American that subscribes to a lot of those rituals, and so sometimes I think that it's relevant, where other times I think, you know, the entity that I'm dealing with is not Native American, and he doesn't give a crap if I'm saging, and I don't necessarily subscribe to it 100%. And so when I immediately have that belief, I call it like a balloon. My belief bubble has been popped, and I think, you know what, my intuition's telling me to do something different. And in my experience, when things, you know, don't respond to saging, or they don't respond to Catholic metals of protection, or quartz in your windowsill, or whatever ritual that you're subscribing to, lilacs
and
on
salt.
your dinner table.
I tried salt.
Salt circles, brick dust. I mean, there's a whole list of them.
I did a lot
of really great history, but sometimes it's just taking power of your space and saying, hey, man, I've got rules in this house. Do I need to write them down? Because I can do that. And I've sounded like a crazy person where I literally stood in my kitchen and I wrote out like a 10 commandment. Like, you can communicate during these hours. You know, you can come to me at this time. Don't show up in the back, you know, in the mirror like a darn Michelle Pfeiffer horror movie. You need to come to me like this, and you need to do this. And when you give them those specifics, they communicate with you, they follow your guidelines, or they leave. So it might be,
and
if you've not tried that.
It's important to have your barriers. It's important to have your own barriers.
Yeah.
And no matter how it is you set that up, even if it's just using your own aura, if you can set your own barriers.
Yeah. Just be empowered. Trust yourself and say, you know what, if I don't feel like the sage is working, I'm going to try something else. Don't think that it's something you're doing wrong. It's not you or what you're doing. It's just that opportunity for you to do something else that you feel is going to work.
Well, that's
and
funny.
I
felt
to
like
add
he's
to
just...
that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Oh, no, I agree with you guys 100%. And I'm going to try some of that other stuff of the thinking more and the writing it down because I have verbalized. But I feel like in a way it's almost like he's so mad and desperate. Like he is trying to, I don't know what he wants. And I asked him, and that's when the touching started and my little boy came running out of the room one day and it happened to him. And I was like, listen, we don't do that here. You know, we don't touch. But I'm like, it's weird. I'm like, what is this? Like, was this guy like a drunk or something? Like, how do you not get it? Like, just stop, go, or let me help you if that's what I'm supposed to do since you're still here.
Right. Some spirits are persistent, you know, and
they really are.
I try and meet and balance that persistence to the point that I feel like, you know, I can be a bitch if I have to, and I can meet you there, you know, and and I can give you my guidelines in a different tone if that's what you respond to. But really, you know, we try and be happy in this house. We don't touch the children in this house, and if it continues, then I'm going to leave. And you know, you've left, I've left, and I mean, sometimes that's what you do. If it doesn't listen, you know, that's always an option. Of course, you don't want to do that.
Oh, yeah.
You want to be
that's
strong.
The thing that alarms me is because I'm like, I know what I dealt with at the last place, and I know this dude, I'm pretty sure is a guy because it's the same type of spirit. I have some pictures, too, of him, and I stopped doing that. Believe it or not, when friends and family had given this particular one energy like that, it made it worse. So I stopped that. Everything else was, you know, I have been able to leave the one thing where that was up in the Hudson Valley in New York. And this guy, this is like the fourth place that we all recall that he's just coming with us. But he's getting more frustrated, it seems like, which is why I'm confused. You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
Because I don't think he really wants to hurt anybody, which is why I mean, it's not very nice, but I feel like, is he a drunk? Because I'm like, I don't think he means to cause harm, but he's getting aggravated, and it just makes no sense to me at this point, you know? I'm like, moving, I feel like he's just going to come until I can figure out what it is that he needs from us.
Well, I think that if you listened to your self-talk, that you're telling us quite a bit about the entity, that he doesn't mean harm. He's likely a man. Maybe he's got experience with alcoholism. You know, how does that play into your life? And what life lessons, you know, does that play in with you? And, you know, maybe he's here to help you deal with something.
Very true. Very good points there. There's a connection.
Oh, there's always a connection. Yeah, I would have to agree with Nikki in that. There's always a connection. I love you said, believe it or not, I have that tattooed on my body. So that's one of my mottos. So, Charity, I would love it, and for anybody listening, if you can identify or empathize with her experience. I get these all of the time, and there are no right answers. Like, there's nothing that Nikki and I or anyone else can tell you that's right or guaranteed. It's really just following your intuition on all of the millions of things that you could do and finding out what's going to work for your situation, and to not be frustrated by that, and to just be like, wow, this is a learning experience. But start with you.
It's important to remember that every situation like this is completely unique, and every spirit is completely unique, just like we're all completely unique.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to take into this and to remember that this is not, it's not a pattern, because I feel you feeling that you worrying that there's a pattern here in your life. But every situation is definitely unique, and that's important. That's important for you.
You got to email me, Charity.
Okay. Sorry, you made me feel better when you said that, because I was trying to force that out of my head, because I'm like, I know this isn't the same experience, and I'm not going to go through the same thing again. It's different, but it kind of creeps back in.
Well, and
knowing it and feeling
creepiness,
it are different things sometimes.
Right, and that creepiness, it's like, I wrote a book about my experiences because I felt the same way. I felt like, man, it doesn't matter where I go, I have these experiences, and I'm never going to not have them.
Yeah.
They're always going to be with me. And kind of learning, how do you cope with that? And for me, it was writing a book and helping other people.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
It works. Yeah. So
we don't have very much time left. I'm sorry, guys, but Charity, I'm going to have to let you go for now. But go ahead, and if you want to give your email address or contact information real quick, so that Charity can email you.
Absolutely, it's the Paranormal Sarah with an H @gmail.com, and you can also go to sarahsoderlund.com. That's kind of my website, or anything that you want to contact me for. Or if you just are thinking, oh, crap, I don't have a pen handy, if you remember Paranormal Sarah and you Google that, you're bound to find me on Twitter or Facebook. And you can feel free to contact me on those platforms as well. I'm there. And I'll be, I know you're a 914, so you're probably not in Kansas City. But I'll be in Kansas City in October here with PRS. And but again, sarahsoderlund.com or the Paranormal Sarah @gmail.com.
Oh, great. And where can we look for your book? That might help me a lot.
Ooh,
yes,
my book.
We haven't even gotten to that yet.
Right.
Oh, I'll
look at you, Charity.
Listening when you mute me, so that's fine.
Okay.
So I'll listen in.
So my book, and she just what a good plugger there. It's due out this October. It's actually October 5th, and it's called Haunted by the Abyss. And I'm very, I have to say, anxious about it because it's my personal stories of some of the experiences that I've had. You know, a lot of people ask me the darkest places or the creepiest places or the experiences that I've had. And, you know, I've been to the catacombs in Paris, and I've been to the London Tower, and I've been to these, you know, very haunted locations, but I didn't have the experiences that I had in my own apartment, you know, or my own house growing up. But you can find it. It'll be on Amazon. You can find it at Barnes & Noble. It's through Llewellyn Publishing, so you can find Llewellyn online, and you can pre-order there. But it'll be out this October. So this Halloween season, as the leaves start falling, and it's that favorite time of year for those of us in the paranormal, I encourage you to go out, especially if you're listening. There's a connection with us. You're listening to me now, and I'm hearing you, and you're hearing me. To go get it, man. Haunted by the Abyss by Sarah Soderlund.
Definitely pick that up, guys. And thank you again, Charity, for calling. We really do appreciate your call, and I hope that we were able to give you a little bit of perspective and a little bit of help there with your situation that you're having. So thank you again for calling this evening.
Oh, a lot. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Courageous.
And have a great evening. Wow, Sarah, we didn't even get to all the things that I wanted to, but that's okay because I really do feel it important to be spirit-led, you know, when doing the show. And I think this is how tonight's show was exactly supposed to be. And I do want to give you a couple more moments to talk about your book. Here in a couple minutes we're going to go to Mike, but let's talk about your book for just a couple of minutes. You said these are your own personal stories, and I think that's absolutely fascinating. And I think it's going to make for such a wonderful read that this is something so personal and real that you've experienced. It's not like a historian and we're reading it from an outsider's perspective.
Right. No, it's and they are short stories, so they're like 3 to 7 page chapters that just take you into some of my experiences. And for those listening in Kansas City, I can't disclose the locations obviously in a book, but a lot of the areas are from experiences that I had growing up right there, on the river in Kansas City, right in that valley. And from alien encounters to the more elaborations of that entity that showed itself to me as my grandfather, to just the other experiences that I've had, and how they've changed my perceptions, and whether or not it's the Ouija board. I've got a chapter on that, and because that's always a question that comes up, and divination and quantum theory. I mentioned a little bit about quantum discussions and just all sorts of fun things. So yeah, hopefully it's an eclectic, fun read, and I do hope that people will give me feedback. Don't be too harsh, but honest feedback, because I want to know.
Well,
I want to know how.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm totally looking forward to it. So guys, it's Haunted by the Abyss. It will be available in October, Amazon and Barnes & Noble through Llewellyn Publishing, which is an excellent company. They really are. I love Llewellyn. So give us your contact information just one more time real quick, and then we're going to go to Mike. The Paranormal Sarah at Gmail, or you can go to www.sarahsoderlund.com, SarahSoderlund. I married a nice Norwegian man, and so sarahsoderlund.com. right, Minnesotan. But you can go on Facebook. You can go on Twitter, you can go on Tumblr, you can go on whatever platform is most comfortable for you, and I'll likely be there. And I love interacting with people and hearing their stories and learning from you. And I encourage everyone, go out there and check me out. And also,
be at the PRS
and just to reiterate that you are going to be at the PRS Psychic Fair October 16th through 18th. And on that note, we'll go to Mike really quick so he can tell us what's coming up in PRS. Take it away, Mikey.
Coming up on August 29th, we have Margie Kay with Extraterrestrial Communication. On September 19th, we have Joe Anderson, Evening with Bill. Jumping to November, on the 14th, we have Robin Stevens with Feng Shui. And then December 5th is our annual holiday dinner and award ceremony. All of these will be held at the Westwood, Kansas Community Center. And then back in October, as mentioned already, October 16th to 18th is the Psychic Fair. All of our meetings and fair information can be found on the website at PRSKC.org.
And that is our 45th annual Fall Psychic Fair. We don't do the Spring Fair anymore, which I kind of hope we do again someday, but our 45th annual. Let me put that in perspective like I do all the time. I'm only 41, so it's older than I am.
Yeah, and that's where me as a young girl, my mother went and was a reader there, and my nanny's grandmother was a reader there, and my sister and I will be there. So I hope to see everyone.
And I'm so excited. And speaking of which, your sister is also going to be on our show in a few weeks. Here's what we've got coming up on Radio PRS. Next week we have psychic and intuitive consultant Shelley Jennings. She's absolutely fabulous. The week after that, on September 2nd, we have Levi Pierce, another intuitive consultant that I think you'll really enjoy. Then we have Kat Wilder, who is Sarah's sister, on September 9th, and she'll be talking about psychometry. And then on September 16th, we have a PRS Fair panel, so we can talk about what's going on at the fair this year. Thank you so much to Sarah for being my guest tonight. Thank you to Mike, my co-host. Thank you to PRS for bringing us this wonderful program, and thank you to all of you who listen so faithfully. And remember, this show is archived, so tell other people to listen to it. blogtalkradio.com/PRSKC radio. And thank you, and have a wonderful evening. And cue music.